All right, well, good morning, everybody. My name's Ashley Ball. I head up our customer success team here at Flosum, and we're really excited to kick off our summer 2021 release with everybody today. I'm gonna just kind of kick us off here, and we're gonna hand it over to a few other folks. But I just wanted to first off, again, say thank you to all of our customers that are on the line with us today. We hope you're just as excited about all the new features coming your way as we are. You know, our goal at the beginning of the year was to really, focus on embracing change, starting the year with some excitement and positivity. And I would say that the team over here is absolutely doing that. We are committed more than ever to making Flosum the best solution for your DevOps team in the market. And we've really been focusing on a lot of really important things going on in the industry right now: security, advancements in your DevOps stack, analytics. This is such a great market to be in, and it's such a great profession to be in right now. It's growing heavily, and we're excited to be growing with it. I think you'll see as we go through the day today that our message for today's presentation is really focused around building and enhancing our product to meet you, our customers' needs, and hopefully exceed your expectations there. We don't have this amazing product without the input and feedback from you. So please keep those conversations going with our team. Please keep bringing your ideas to the table. We take every one of those very seriously. I'm so lucky to be leading this great team of folks here at Flosum, and we've invested heavily into our customer success team over the past few months. From anywhere from adding new customer success managers, our support team has added some folks to it, our technical solution architects, and more. So if you haven't met your CSM team, please make sure that you put a note in the Q&A panel on the right-hand side so we can make sure you know who that person is. We have a lot on the agenda today, so I'm gonna jump right in, and I want the customer success team to really lead us through the agenda today. But before I get started, two things. One, if you have questions during this webinar, on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a Q&A panel that you can put your questions into. Our team will be answering questions as we can throughout the presentation. And if we don't get to anything during today's presentation, we'll make sure to respond right afterwards. Second of all, to anyone who's a newer customer to Flosum, or somebody who might even be a prospect looking into Flosum, I want to make sure that you have two great spots that you can look at for some good feedback from current customers out on the web. So the first spot is on the G2 Crowd platform. So you'll see that's the right-hand side screenshot here. I'm really proud of the team. We're really proud of the team for, right now we're ranked the #1 continuous integration tool in the market. So that comes from a lot of different areas. You can see there ease of use, the quality of support, ease of doing business with. All of those things kind of get wrapped up into that, and right now we're #1 there. So really proud of that. But go out there and see what other people are saying about Flosum and how they're utilizing it. I think it's a really great place for you to see that. Alongside G2 is also the Salesforce App Exchange. So we have a 5.0 average rating, which is the highest that you can get. And again, go out there and see what other people are saying about Flosum and how they're utilizing it. So really proud of those things. We're really recognizing the market for our leadership there and our thought leadership. And we're going to just continue to do that. So without further ado, let me get into the agenda for today. So you're going to hear from Shannon and Neff, two of our CSMs, right after I stop talking about our spring release preview. Then we're going to kick it over to Mayank, who's going to walk us through any of the key new features of today's presentation. Joe Ferrari is going to follow that up with some information on database backup and recovery. We released that officially during our last webinar, and we have a lot of updates to talk through with how we're moving forward in this area. And then Don's going to talk about what's next, and we're going to hear some closing information from Matt, who's one of our other CSMs. So without further ado, Shannon and F, I'll kick it over to you guys, and let's get started.
Thank you, Ashley. So again, welcome everyone. I'm just going to touch on some new features with our release. We will go into a further demo, a little bit further into the presentation on some other product releases that we have in enhancements. So things I want to call out to attention are we now have branch state diagrams, and if you've been upgraded lately, you might see those perhaps in your branches. If not, they will be in this next organizational upgrade. We also have partial deployments within the branch, some environment variables, and one thing that everyone has been asking for, branch permissions. We also have made some improvements to our data masking, rolled out phase 2 of our deployment analyzer, which was new in our last release. We've added some deployment naming, and something that I know everyone is probably very happy to see, we've added some reporting, some DORA metrics reporting to Flosum as well. Some additional improvements that we've made in the system are some pull requests, branch UI buttons, static code analysis, and the Flosum Sandbox. And what I want to touch upon about the Flosum Sandbox is that should your Sandbox crash, you will receive an email notification and it will restart for you automatically. So that's another major improvement to the Flosum Sandbox. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Neff. He's going to talk about velocity and some other improvements as well.
Hey, thank you, Shannon. Thanks everyone for making it. I'm gonna get a little bit under the hood before we give way to Mayank to demo the things that Shannon has given us insight into for the new major release. But a little deeper under the hood, we do have additional velocity support. A lot of our core features for main Flosum are now compatible with velocity integration. So, you know, one of the big things, all velocity component types, version control, deployment, scheduled and manual, and conflict merge screen. So for those of you who are familiar with our software, you can do side-by-side conflict resolution in real time. Some additional support for commands and some version support as well for matrix version and calculation procedures. Additionally, in Data Migrator, we have quality of life improvement with one-time org registration, so you don't have to log in numerous times to the orgs that you are migrating data to and from. Additional support for rules and the skill object. Next slide, please. And by way of integrations, just to kind of show, like we are with you every step of the way throughout your DevOps process. And if you have additional business systems in your technology stack, we play well with those. So anything you see here, you're completely able to utilize within Flosum, so you can, you know, further utilize Flosum as a tool for compliance and testing and control. And additionally, one thing that I'd also like to call out that makes this highly customizable is we also support webhooks. So if you don't see something here, if you don't see the logo, that doesn't rule it out completely. If what you're trying to integrate with has webhooks, you can utilize that through Flosum as well. Without further ado, a little hands-on walkthrough with my colleague Mayank.
Great, thank you, Neff. And I'm really excited to show you some of our new features in the Summer 21 release. And we have quite a few of them. So without further ado, let's jump into them and take a look. So as Shannon mentioned, the first thing I'll be demonstrating is the branch state diagram. Now, when you will open a branch, you will end up as the default tab in the branch with this diagram, which pretty much shows you the source of your components that are sitting in your branch. So for example, here, the components came from this branch and this org. Maybe I took a snapshot and put it into this branch directly and then merged this branch into the specific branch. And then whatever activities I have been doing in this branch can be seen. So for example, with this particular org, I have been running the deployment analyzer multiple times. With this branch, I have been merging into it, ran a few validates and deploys against this one, and a few other operations here. The lines are color-coded to signify the last operation that happened with the entity on the right, or with the target. So if it succeeded, then you end up with a green line. If it failed, then you have a red line. So gives you a pretty good idea. It also tracks whether the latest operation that happened with the latest version of the branch or not. And if it is out of sync, then it shows that to you as well. So just a nice visual of all the activities and the source of components and where they are going into, etc. And then, of course, if you wanted to see, let's say that, okay, we merged into this particular branch, and then what happened there, you can just click on it, and it'll pretty much show you the branch state diagram for the next branch. Right? So you can this way track where your components have been flowing all the way through. The other thing that you will notice here is that we have changed the order of the buttons on the branch. So whichever buttons we felt were being used most often are visible here on the screen, and then some of the less used ones you will access through the drop-down at the end of the buttons list. And if you click, let's say, on the deploy button, as Shannon had mentioned, we now have the ability to do partial branch deployments. So before this release, branches were deployed as a whole. But let us say you had a situation where you wanted to only deploy part of the components in the branch. In that scenario, you had to create a new branch and then merge the existing branch into that one, just moving the components into that second branch that you wanted to deploy, and then you would deploy that branch. Now, if you want to deploy a subset of components, you have the list of components available to you on the deploy screen. You can just select your target org, do your tests, and then just cherry pick the components that you are interested in deploying. You can also give your deployments a name now. So earlier, Flosum would generate an auto-generated name, which wouldn't make much sense to most people because it was auto-generated. But now you can give relevant names to your deployments. And the same facility to cherry pick the components you want to make as part of your package applies to destructive changes as well. And this has been a long standing request all the way from the days when we used to have deployments as a separate object to allow destructive changes to be removed from branches as a configurable or choice. And the reason for it is, let us say you had this branch, you deployed it in QA. So now it deleted these two destructive change components. However, now you got some feedback from QA and you wanted to, you made the changes, add them to the branch, try to deploy it again. And if you had to deploy the branch as a whole, you would not really be able to, or the deployment as a whole, because these components are already deleted. So for that scenario, now it just makes life a lot easier, where you can pretty much uncheck the components here and deploy the rest of the changes that you would want to do. Now, as I mentioned, you can give the metadata log a name, and there have been changes. So we can pretty much see here that we can now give our own names instead of the auto-generated ones that Flosum would generate. And in the metadata log, because we can do the operations on a subset of the components, so now we show exactly which components the operation happened on. You don't really need to go into the attachments to see what is there. You can see it right here. And it also shows the results of the operation. So if you had an error, it would show up those components. If the components succeeded, then it'll show you the status also. And if it was a successful, let's say, deployment, then you would have the rollback button. So you can roll back right from here. Let's just say you had done this deployment to QA, everything is good. Now you want to go to UAT. So you can again just do the deployment right from here. You don't need to cherry pick the same components again from the branch. Right. So a few changes in the metadata log record that corresponds to the deployments and validates. Moving on, one of the other major features which I think will make life a lot more easier for a lot of you who have been asking for it is the ability to do branch permissions. So when you will go to your branches now, you will see a permissions tab, and you will be able to select and assign permissions to users to a particular branch. So this will work fairly similar to the org permissions you are quite used to, assigning permissions to orgs. So now you can do something similar for branches also. By default, the permissions will be open, but if you assign permissions and restrict, then the restrictions will apply. And right now it is at the group level, so you will need to group your users into different groups, public groups, and then based on that you can assign them the necessary permissions. Again, Flosum ships with a couple of permission sets that correspond to the various permissions that are available on the branch. And you can create your own permission sets the way I did here. These two are shipping with Flosum. This one is something which I created. And to go over the list of permissions that are available to you. So for example, you can control who can commit to the branch, who can commit this branch to the repository, and then the ability to do deployments, edit components, run the deployment analyzer, and pretty much all the operations that you can do on a branch. You have a permission for it, and you can slice and dice them in any way to create your permission sets that make sense in your case if the default ones that we ship don't work for you. And you can group your users in whichever way you want to and assign them the necessary permissions. Going forward, there are a few improvements to the deployment analyzer. So for those of you who have still not been using, this is the one feature that I would really recommend you take a look at. Think of it as a validate on steroids. It will catch a lot of errors upfront that your Salesforce standard deploy or validate will not give you in a single shot. So for example, here I have a profile, and this profile is missing some components in the target org, and they are not in the branch that I'm trying to deploy also. So if this was Salesforce, it will fail for sure, but then it'll only tell me that, okay, this custom tab is missing. And then maybe I add this custom tab to my branch and do my deployment again. And then it'll tell me this custom object is missing and so on. So pretty much if I had 10 missing components, I would need to do 10 validates or deploys to figure out the list of components which was missing from this one single profile. A deployment analyzer, it tells you upfront in a single shot all the components that are missing. Not only that, it allows you to remove their reference. Let us say you were just playing around with this tab, you are not interested in moving it to the target org. So you can just select this and say remove reference, and it'll remove it. The additional feature that we have now done is, let us say you actually missed a component in your branch, and now you come here and you see that, oh, I missed this component. So now in the deployment analyzer results for the missing components tab, you have a new subtab called retrieve missing components. And here you can select the org from which you would like to retrieve. You can pretty much select and retrieve all the missing components, or you can cherry pick the components that you would like to retrieve. You can filter the screen by the type of components that are missing. You can search for any missing component type, and pretty much then you can do the get components button to retrieve these components and add them directly into the branch. So you don't need to do a snapshot and then push it into the branch. It will add it directly into the branch for you. Moving on, as Shannon mentioned, a lot of you have been asking for some DevOps metrics, and we have listened to you and come up with the standard DORA metrics that go with DevOps tools. So here, for example, on the screen, you can see the number of deployments that have been happening on this particular org based on the dates. And so one of them shows you the number of deployments, the other is showing you the number of components that are getting deployed as per the timeline here. These can be filtered as you wish. It will only show the operations or the deployments happening for certain orgs, etc. if you want to. So that is pretty much available in this dashboard. You can also see the kind of components and users, etc., who have been doing these deployments in this bubble chart. You will be able to see who the user was, how many components they deployed, and with each one you will be able to see who has been maybe which of your developers has been more productive, and maybe you can gamify this and come up with some metrics and goals for your developers. We also have the lead time tracking enabled now. So lead time will track the branches all the way from their creation to them getting deployed into production. And of course, this is a very important indicator to see how quickly your changes are moving from, let's say they were done and they have been put into a branch to production. So as we can see here, for example, we are tracking the lead time, and with time, our chart shows that things are getting better and the lead time is decreasing as we go along. So this is something that you would want to certainly take a look at and track. Also, here, this particular graph will tell you the ratio between your rollbacks and deployments. I seem to be doing quite well here. I've got 100% deployments, no rollbacks. But if you are having to do some rollbacks, it will show you the differences there. And finally, this shows you your failure rates for the orgs that you might have selected to collect these metrics on, or you can filter on the type of org. And it is basically telling you how many of your deployments were failing versus succeeding. And the failure rate, again, finally, you do want to see it reducing as it goes along. So these are some of the DORA metrics that will be available to you initially. With this, the reports that are behind these metrics, you can, of course, customize and build your own metrics as well. And we certainly look forward to your feedback on what else you might want in terms of the metrics that you would like to see here. Moving on, Flosum is introducing this concept of environment variables. So the use case for this is, let's say, certain settings, for example, external data sources, name credentials, maybe even usernames and workflows, etc., where you have different values in these components for different org types. So if you have an external data source, maybe your production org connects to the production version of that other enterprise system, and your QA connects to the QA of that enterprise system, and the dev to the dev. So when you are doing these sort of deployments, you don't really want whatever is in production to go to QA, or whatever is in QA to go to production. And yet, if you have made some changes, maybe, as I said, with usernames, when I go from dev to UAT, I'm flosum.com.dev in my dev environment and flosum.com.uat in my UAT environment, and that can't quite go through. So we have environment variables that are defined now, and you can pretty much define any environment variable in the XML of that component. If you were to edit it and put a tag that looked something like this, and then you can define the value of that tag for every org that you would deploy that component to. Then as part of the deployment, Flosum will replace the tag with whatever is the relevant value for that particular environment. So this is something that you will see with environment variables. We have seen a lot of our clients ask for them, and I'm sure you will find it quite useful in reducing the number of post-deploy steps that you might be doing with your own deployments. That's where we went through a lot of the post-deploy steps that were shared with us that were being done manually after a deployment. And this was something that came up again and again, that there are certain types of these changes that are relevant and specific to an org only. So we certainly hope that is where you would be using and changing these components on the fly. Moving on, there are certain changes to our code quality analysis, the Apex PMD integration that we have, which a lot of you have. So as of now, the Apex PMD integration pretty much runs anytime you add components to a branch. If you have the code quality scanning enabled, it will automatically go and do that code scan for you. However, you might have a situation where you maybe want to do it on schedule. And that is what we have done now in the settings for the code quality. You can now set up a schedule to whatever your works for you. So even though this says weekly, but if I selected multiple days here, it would be a daily if I wanted to make it. And this does not run on all the branches in your org. So there is now a flag in the branch, and you have to enable that flag. And only this will run only on the branches which have that flag enabled. So mostly you would not want it running on schedule on every feature branch that you have in your org. However, if you have any integration branches or release branches, that is something where you would want to run this on those sort of branches. And the difference also is the fact that when it runs automatically as you add components to a branch, it only runs on the components being added. It does not run on all the components in the branch. But when you run it on schedule, it is going to run on all the components in the branch and effectively give you the results for that particular branch, the latest results, how they stand. And as PM or as architect who's tracking those changes, you can pretty much see at that point in time what the status of your branch is on a daily basis, and are your issues that are being found getting reduced or not. Not only can you do this on schedule now, you can also do this on demand. So for example, if I go into this particular branch and here, so now I have a button here where whenever I want to, I can just run my code quality check, and it will go and get the results back for me for the entire branch. So these are certain enhancements on the code quality side that you will see. Moving on to some improvements on the pull request. So as most of you will be aware, pull request is Flosum's code review mechanism. And what has been great about the pull request is, as a reviewer, when you go into the review, you have always had the ability to see all the components in your branch and whether a version of them exists in the repository. And since the repository matches with what is in production, so it gives you as a reviewer the ability to see the change in the branch compared to what sits in production, and give your comments and approve or reject accordingly based on that. However, we saw that there were some cases out there where maybe there were some long-running projects that had not yet been committed to the repository, but they were being, let's say, collected in a branch, all the components and source code associated with those projects. And when the code review would happen, it was desirous to compare against that project branch versus the repository. So that is the ability that you have now. You can, by default, it will still compare against the repository that is associated with the branch. However, you now have the ability to actually select pretty much any branch and compare your items against that branch and do the comparison. And finally, moving on to data masking. As some of you would be aware, data masking is a new feature that we had introduced in our last release, and we continue to work and make it better. So one of the feedbacks that we received was that the logging we had was not sufficient in terms of providing detailed enough information of where the process was, since some of the changes were happening on orgs where we were changing literally millions of records from a masking perspective. So now, as we can see, we have a much more detailed logging feature available here. And pretty much in real time, every 30 seconds or so, this will refresh and tell you, let's say these were the 3 objects whose records I was migrating as part of my data masking, sorry, not migrating, but masking, as part of my masking operation. So it will, for example, tell you at any point in time that you are checking that, okay, the accounts are all migrated, and maybe the contacts, 4,000 out of 8,000 are migrated, and the rest are remaining, and the case we have not yet started on. So you will have that level of logging available, refreshing every 30 seconds. So you can track pretty closely what stage your data masking operation is on. One of the other features that we have added to the data masking is the ability to do filters. So in our previous version, you would specify the filters for a particular object, and it would go and mask pretty much every record in the target org that corresponded to that object. But there were situations where, for example, if you were masking the lead object, and you didn't really want to touch your closed leads. All you were interested in was your open leads, or maybe certain types of accounts or contacts, etc. So now we have added the filter option to the data masking. And you can pretty much give any SQL query out here, and it will only mask the corresponding records, the matching records that are coming up with the filtered option with various options from a masking perspective. And one of the other changes here are further options to mask data. So for example, a couple of new options have been added for masking emails. Earlier, you could randomize emails, and that was about it. Now, with this release, you can add suffixes to email addresses. So, for example, you want to invalidate your email addresses, but you still want to have that original email address also, just in case you want to go back to the original for a few records. So then the suffix option comes in quite handy. You can pretty much just say that, okay, my suffix is .invalid, for example, and then whatever is the original email after the data masking, it will get like msing@flosum.com.invalid kind of thing. And the other option that has been added is the ability to just give another email that you want to add in there. So I now have the ability to just say that mask all my emails and just replace them with this specific email address, invalid@flosum.com, for example. So those are some of the other improvements from a data masking perspective that have been introduced, and we are working on other options as well. For example, randomizing yet or coming up with patterns and keeping things unique for certain fields. So these are some of the changes and new features that are coming in the next release. Again, as Ashley mentioned, a lot of these are based on feedback from you. And please do keep the feedback coming, and we will continue to introduce more and more of these features. And now I will pass it on to Joe Ferrari for our data backup and recovery through. Joe, over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. I will go over the features of our data backup and recovery solution, aka DBNR. Flosum's newest service, DBNR, is used for backing up your Salesforce data. It is currently hosted on Amazon Web Services and will eventually be hosted on Azure and Google Cloud as well. The data is also stored in those environments. At this time, Flosum takes care of the setup of your environment. We can do this on your AWS instance, or we can give you the steps and work with you so everything can get set up correctly. The screen you're looking at is once you're in the application, which is of course web-based, and you're looking at one of your orgs. You see the main features are of course backing up and restore. Currently, you can do a full or incremental backup. They can be scheduled or they can be done ad hoc. You can choose to include or exclude binary objects, which are attachments, as well as big objects. Our restore feature has 3 modes. You can do a basic restore, which restores all records of a certain type. You can do a selective restore, where you choose specific records to be restored. And you can do a removed mode, which restores only deleted records since the last backup that you select, right? We are currently restoring that data to the source org, but we'll be adding a feature so you can restore into a different org. As a best practice, we recommend monthly full backups and daily incremental backups. Some clients choose to restore attachments or big objects less frequently, since they don't change as much. This will help keep your storage costs lower. We have a feature to validate that a backup job contains the correct number of records. Currently, that's done via a MySQL lookup, but we are adding a user interface feature so you can do that without going into the database. There are some limitations, most of which are Salesforce related. Some clients have a limit on their daily API request, which might affect things such as getting all their attachments in one backup. Auto-numbered records will be updated if they are restored. Salesforce will assign them a new number. And some records can only be backed up during a full backup because there's no last modified date. And we, of course, have a list of these types of objects. Future features will be to allow backing up of your metadata as well. Of course, our main tool already does this, but we'll be adding that feature into DBNR. We'll be adding the ability to have your scheduled jobs persist after an application upgrade. We'll be adding various email notifications, such as when a job completes successfully or unsuccessfully, or if there are any exceptions. We'll have a UI feature where you can set your retention policy, as well as set up kind of an auto delete feature for old jobs. Of course, this will also help you manage your storage costs. We'll be able to restore to an org other than the source org. And we'd like to add a pre-backup analysis to indicate any data quality issues in that source org prior to starting a backup. In addition, we'll have upgraded reports and or metrics. If you'd like an estimate on what the licensing and data storage costs would be, you can reach out to your customer success manager. The licensing is done on the Flosum side, and that's pretty straightforward based on typically the number of Salesforce users you have. The data storage, the AWS or Azure costs would be directly proportional to your data and file sizes, as well as the number of attachments and big objects that you have. Again, any questions, please reach out to your customer success manager. Thank you for joining our webinar. And now over to Don.
Awesome. Thank you, Joe. So as we move to the next slide here, we've seen a lot of information, a lot of detail. What Matt and I get to do here at the final 10 minutes or so of this presentation is talk about what's coming next steps, what you should expect to hear from Flosum. So as we move forward, we've been very technical focused. There's some things we want to do with you, with our customers, to help as we continue to deliver these features, this functionality, this value, these processes. One of the things we have heard from a number of our customers, and that consistently comes up, is what about training? What training do you offer? Where can I get more training? And so we want to kind of tackle and address that. We want to tackle that in a pretty specific way. So already you have the certification programs and courses, and we do still highly recommend those. I think those are a great base for overall Flosum functionality. We have done targeted training with groups. As part of implementations, many customers will have their own kind of follow-up training process that you would implement on an ongoing basis for new members of your team. But what we are planning to do is start monthly training sessions. These will begin in July. And in these training sessions, we plan to have a very specific topic or a small number of topics per session. We would like to make sure we prioritize these topics with you, so we hit those key topics that are really most important to you. So we are definitely interested in hearing your priorities, the topics that your team might prefer. Our initial plan for our first session in July will be about merging conflicts. There are a few different spots in Flosum where you get to the opportunity to merge conflicts, and so that is the plan for the first session in July. And then after that, we'll publish kind of an agenda for the ongoing monthly training sessions. So we're really looking forward to that. Number two, we've had a couple of them in the past, but what we will be doing moving forward is holding more regularly and structured leadership discussions. So we plan to run these bi-monthly. They will be starting later this summer, so in the August timeframe. Again, we will be planning a specific topic or small number of topics per session, almost like a breakout type concept. And in these discussions, we would love to discuss with you, hear from the leaders within your organizations so that we can work with you to drive directions of Flosum, of DevOps, understand the current DevOps business and process needs so that we can help establish a pattern and a roadmap together ahead. So really, really looking forward to those two targeted and planned monthly and bi-monthly sessions. And the third topic that we'll be starting here quite quickly is we do intend on making more use of, I've called them feature focus groups here. Really what these are is it's a small working group of select customers pending the feature and the applicability to your organization. And we want to further engage with that smaller, I'll call it a safe group, for constructive feedback. So this would be for things like potential features or solutions. What is the value of those solutions for you? Showcase kind of a prototype of a solution. Get your feedback. Does it work for you? How would your teams use it? What could we improve upon? Does this even offer value to your organization? We really want your candid feedback on these so that when these become what I would say more publicly available, we're hitting the mark as often as we can. Okay. So you should see a reach out, or a small set of you will see a reach out. We do plan on this first feature group occurring here by the end of June. So invites, if they're not already out, will be out shortly or will be offered within your regular cadence meetings with your customer success manager. If you have interest, or if there's particular folks out there that really want to participate and kind of help provide feedback and directions within this type of concept, please let your customer success manager know. That will help provide what I would say the easiest path to identifying who participates in these focus groups. Very good. And now maybe Mike, let's move on to the next slide here. Okay. And now, before we close, I do want to capture your feedback. Previously in our sessions, we've had kind of the feedback live, a pop-up box, and we've waited a couple of minutes. So what we're doing is we're going to try a little different approach this time. And we do have 3 questions that we would encourage your participation, that we'd like to hear from you on. And so we're asking, please do visit menti.com. You can also use the QR code that you see below on the screen. And when you visit menti.com, if you don't use the QR code, you can enter the code 23410905. And when you arrive at that page, that initial page, you'll be prompted with 3 questions. And I'll just kind of rehash those for you. These questions are important to us, and I think they're important for the overall Flosum and Salesforce DevOps community. So, are a Flosum user, we are interested to hear what the one key feature, piece of functionality, process that you would like us to improve upon. We do encourage that feedback. Both Ashley and Mike have referenced that earlier, and this really helps us prioritize. It really helps us kind of determine what comes next on the Flosum roadmap. Second question will be, what is the #1 feature that you value the most? Again, this helps with prioritization. It helps us understand where are you getting the most value out of Flosum. It helps understand priority areas and how the DevOps community here is doing. And then finally, kind of related to the first slide I had is, you know, as a valued kind of member of our Flosum ecosystem, we really want to hear from you how we can support your personal and team growth. So this is a really third question. It is a little bit open-ended, but it's a really good place to consider overall how we can help your growth. And also, if you have any specific training topics, etc., discussion topics from a leadership perspective that would be valuable to you and your team, please do enter them in this third question here, and we'll take it from there, and we'll engage with you further on that. So with that, I think that's kind of the next steps I had in mind, and now I'll pass it over to Matt on some of the key next steps in terms of upgrades and what comes next.
Great, thanks, Don. So to close out today's session, a couple of points just to kind of rehash. Upgrade, in terms of the upgrade, the next steps. So in order to take advantage of the new features we just saw, we will need to upgrade your current Flosum org. So we'll be sending out an email letting you know your scheduled upgrade date. There's 3 dates right now slated for July 3rd, July 10th, and July 17th. If you choose not to receive your upgrade, or if you'd like to reschedule your designated date and time that's sent to you, you must choose to opt out. And once the upgrade is complete, you will receive the usual email update letting you know it was completed and prompting you to complete the post-install steps. As a reminder, customer reviews, just a friendly reminder, we definitely love to hear from all of you regarding your experiences with Flosum so far. If you do have a couple of minutes, we'd very much appreciate you leaving a quick review of Flosum on either the Salesforce App Exchange or g2.com. Those are those 2 sites that actually showed at the top of the meeting. You can work with your customer success manager if you have any questions on that. Regarding sharing today's presentation with any team members that may not have been able to attend, the recording will be uploaded to the Success Portal later today, and it will be sent out via email tomorrow. And last, if you want more information on all things Flosum, anything you saw today, general Flosum questions, data migrator, data masking, data backup and recovery, remember your 2 primary points of contact are always #1, your designated customer success manager, and #2, the Flosum Success Portal. And for anyone who's new to Flosum, if you like what you've seen today and want to learn more, you can please reach out and book a demo on the Flosum homepage. Can you go to the next slide, Mac? And just as a reminder regarding the Success Portal, that is our online knowledge base, as well as the avenue for which you can submit support tickets. And you can work with your customer success manager if any of your team members need to be granted access to the portal that don't already have it. And so with that, that concludes today's presentation. The Flosum team definitely wants to thank each of you for joining today. We hope you found the information shared today useful and informative, and hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Thanks.